Hello and welcome to this week's ARK development kit. In this week, we're going to talk about the sky and how we're going to start some of the weather systems. So the sky and weather system in the ARK development kit uses the TrueSky simulation tool, which is available in the Unreal Asset Store. This is a notoriously complicated subject, so there may be times frequently in this episode where I just say you need to put in a value and you should probably just accept me at face value, because I don't really have time to explain every single detail of the TrueSky assets. With that said, I will do my best, and hopefully you'll be able to pick up on some of the things that I'm using and be able to implement this on your own map. Worst comes to worst, you can implement a very rudimentary system on your own map that will follow either the center or my map. So I've gone ahead and started this process because quite frankly it's pretty difficult, and I needed to make sure that I knew how to do it prior to showing you guys how to do it. So I'm going to hide everything except the persistent level. So that's just my main level. And once that loads, we'll see that I've made a folder up here. You can right click on the scene outlier underneath everything and hit create folder to create a folder. In this folder, I've placed the things that we need to start implementing the sky and some of the weather systems. The first thing that we need is the BP_SkySphere_ARK. You can find that down here in the content browser by typing BP_Sky_sphere_ARK. You just simply need to click and drag this into your scene and then go ahead and drop it into your sky folder. Once it's in, we need to edit a few things that are on the details of the BP_SkySphere_ARK. Sun brightness should be 50, cloud speed should be 1, opacity 0.7, and the star brightness should be 1. These don't really matter. If you leave them as default, that's perfectly fine. The things that are really important for this is that we check colors determined by sun position, meaning that when the sky is up, the colors of the sky are showing daytime, and when the sky is down, we see a nighttime sky sphere. Our day cycle manager, we just select day cycle manager base, sky texture lookup curve, CV sky texture lookup, and the CF sky next frame end for the next frame in position curve. Those are the really important things to have. They may be in default when you implement them. They may not. That depends on which version of the ARK development kit that you use. So if they're default, great. If not, just swap them, just so we're on the same page. And we don't need to worry about any of the rest of these, with the exception of just making sure that we have these elements in these 5 arrays here. So the weather, we want the scatter loss to be there. We don't need to change them. I just want to make sure that you have 2 elements in each of the scatter losses and 21 elements in the sky string reference box. I'm not going to explain what those are, but they just need to be there. If they're not there, then send me a comment down below and I'll tell you what you need to do. The next thing that we need is a day cycle manager base. And again, we're going to steal this from an existing map. And we're just going to search day cycle manager and just drag in the day cycle manager blueprint. We don't need to change anything on here for now. We may go back and edit some of this blueprint when we're doing weather systems, but it just needs to be in our scene for now, so just click and drag that in. I've pulled up my global post-processing blueprint. If you remember, we had this before when we were trying to make it so we could play on the level and we could walk around. I've just pulled that up and placed it into Sky because it really has the most to do with Sky and less to do with playing, but that's just a personal preference for me. Before I get to these MattTeens, I believe that's how you say it, I could be wrong. Oops, I want them to be in Sky. we need to do a couple things. First things first, we need to add a skylight. So we're going to sort of jump down a little bit here. We need to add a skylight if you don't have one already. You come up here to the modes window. You can hit Shift F1 to go to place if you're on another one, or you can just click up here and we're going to search for skylight. And we're just going to click and drag that in. We're not going to change anything about it. Next, we're going to add our TrueSky sequence actor. And we can see if we come down here, and if I spell this right, when we search TrueSky sequence, we have quite a few things, but we can't actually drag any of them in. It gives us a red thing. We can't drag this blueprint in. Even if I release it, nothing happens. Because this is a asset on the Unreal store. As with many things in ARK, they use Unreal assets instead of making their own. I personally think that's fine. Some people have an issue with it, but I don't really care. But what we need to do is come down here to our window edit, and we see that there's a plugin in the ARK dev kit called TrueSky. And if you don't have a sequence actor in the scene already, you just need to click this little section that says add sequence to scene, and it'll create a TrueSky sequence actor. So this is going to come in completely empty and with different values. This is going to be the first thing that we change a good amount. The first thing that we're going to do is put custom moon texture in the moon texture. If you just click here and search custom moon, it'll show up. Oops, TrueSky sequence actor. We don't need anything in the cosmic background texture. TrueScatter should be one of the few options here, and TrueSky loss should be one of the few options here. These are materials that are created in the TrueSky asset on the Unreal store. It's not something that the ARK devs have created, so they should be pretty easy to find. Now, we need to change the brightness to 1.5, leave the meters per unit at 0.1, change the minimum simple cloud shadowing to 0.4, the maximum simple cloud shadowing to 0.75, and then the distance to 0.01, and then the max distance to 0.02, and the sharpness to 1 from 0. And then, of course, make sure that it's visible, and we should be good for that. We'll get back to active sky sequences first. Here's how we implement our sky, but we need to edit the blueprint of the map first. But in order to do that, we need to implement just a few more things. So the next thing that we're going to do is come down here to our content browser, and we're going to look up for the MattTeen value interpolation container. And you're just going to click and drag that in, leave it there. We'll use it when we edit a blueprint. Next, we're going to go back up to our modes, Shift F1 to go to place, and we're going to search for MattTeen. And we can see that there's a MattTeen actor. And you can click and drag these in, and it creates a MattTeen actor that you can drag into Sky. And I've named these MattTeen underscore daytime and MattTeen underscore master day cycle. We'll end up creating more of these as we implement the weather system, but for now we just need these two. So I'm going to hide this one for now. So in your MattTeen data, it doesn't really matter what this underscore is. It just needs to say enter p data underscore something. If it's 0, great. If it's 2, fine. Doesn't matter, it just has to say enter p data underscore and then some integer. We're going to uncheck restore after editing. This is for MattTeen underscore daytime. So this is the default case. When you load into the level, this is what it should be. We want the level to start on daytime and then progress to nighttime. So we're going to have our use game state play rate, meaning that when we have a server and we want to change the time, that our MattTeen, our weather system for daytime, will progress with that. Our play rate is going to be 1 by default. And then we're going to check pretty much everything down until looping. This is just the standard state, so we're going to check all these. On the other ones, we won't have these checked. We're going to force a start position of 3. And then just for now, place the MattTeen manager priority at 1000. We'll get to that when we get to weather systems. And we'll use a MattTeen manager, and we'll make sure that the client doesn't play MattTeen if it's completed. Meaning that after the day is completed, the MattTeen manager will go to the next weather system, being twilight or nighttime. It won't repeat itself. And then you can leave everything else on the bottom as is. For the master day cycle, this is not our standard default one. We're going to disable restore after editing. We're going to have a play rate at 1 and use the dedicated server update interpolations. Leave everything else unchecked. And just like before when we set our manager priority for the MattTeen, we're going to set this one to 999. And we're going to leave this don't play if completed unchecked. We are going to prevent saving. So if we're in a transition state, we don't want the world to save. We'll have to wait for it to finish transitioning before we save. We can leave the rest as default. So now that we have all of this, these are all of the aspects and the parts that we need, we can start some of the blueprints. So if we come up here to the top and we can open up our level blueprint, if we click that, it opens up a window with some stuff. Yours will be entirely blank. I'll go through how to make this step by step. We're going to start by focusing on this thing down here. So the day cycle manager base. Up here where we can drag this in our scene outlier, we're just going to click it. And then we're going to come back into our blueprint, level blueprint, and we're going to right click. And we can see at the top it says add reference to the day cycle manager base. That's how we create that node on the thing. And from there, we're going to click this blue circle and drag. And here, we're going to find a variable for TrueSky time. So we can do this faster by saying get variable, if I could type. And then we're going to scroll down till we see get TrueSky time. And this creates this second node that we need. From there, we need to actually use this TrueSky sequence actor. So we go into our scene where our TrueSky sequence actor, which we remember, we came over to window and hit add sequence to scene. So if you don't have that, just do that. And this has several functions in its own blueprint, and we're going to reference one of those functions now. So if we right click, I'm actually going to move this down a little bit just so I can delete it later. That's where we do this. But so we have our TrueSky sequence actor selected in our scene outlier. We right click and we're going to add a reference to the TrueSky sequence actor. That's hard to say. Then we're going to click our blue arrow here. And it's important that we have these things selected because there are different functions that you can call depending on what you have selected. And that's a really fancy way to say that if we don't have things, options won't be available to us. So if we're not in the correct item, if we're not selecting the correct item, we won't have the function that that item might have in its own blueprint. So once we're here, we're going to use the function set time from TrueSky. So this is a sequence actor from the TrueSky asset, and the actor has a function in it, a little segment of code that says set time, and we're going to do that. And we're going to take our TrueSky time value from our base manager, and we're going to connect that up to the value here. So now we can go back to our level. So when we have nothing selected, our level is the base thing, and it has its own functions, one of which is dedicated server. So if this is a ARK dedicated server, which it's not because we're making it ourselves, this will return a Boolean, meaning it's either true or it's false. And we're going to create a branch here. This is sort of like a variable controller. So we're going to have our true or our false. And then we're back on our level. So we have nothing selected. We're back on our level. And we're going to search on MattTeen updated. So when the weather system is updated, we check this variable here. Is the ARK dedicated server? It's not. So it's false. That's what's going to come out of here. But before we do that, we actually need to create something from our TrueSky actor. So from down here, we're going to create a second node off of this. And we're going to search set blended weights. Or set blend weights, sorry. And this blend weights, we're going to take this false and we're going to drop it into here. So if weather changes here, what all this means is if weather changes here and we're not on a dedicated server, then we're going to set something using an array of blended weights that targets our TrueSky sequence actor. So our sky, so it's going to target our sky if the weather changes and we're not on a dedicated server, using something in an array called blended weights, which means we need to create our array of blended weights. So I've done it up here, but I can create it again. We're going to go to our day cycle manager base on our scene outlier, and we're going to right click and hit add reference to day cycle manager base. So now we're going to drag this off, and just like before when we got a variable, so we're going to get a variable of our day cycle manager. We're going to get a variable. I'd really help if I could spell. And we're going to scroll down, and we're going to get when is the variable normal. And we're going to do this 4 times. So we're going to get variable. When is it cold? When is it hot? And when is it raining? So these are our 4 elements. These are our 4 variables from our day cycle manager base that we created here. And we're going to put those into an array. So selecting off of everything onto our main level thing, we're creating essentially a variable on our main level. So we're going to make an array here, and we're going to hit add pin to have 4 elements in the array. It starts at element 0, goes up to element 3 for 4 total arrays. And we're just going to click and drag these in to create this array of these blended values. And you'll remember when we looked at our day cycle manager, we didn't change any of this, but there are a few sky weather sequence floats here, and this is just our blending. We're creating a blend of all of these based on our current weather to create this next bit. So we're taking our array here, and we're going to drag this into our set. And then we're taking our set and we're taking it out. So let's go through all of this again. When the weather is updated, we check to make sure that we're not on a dedicated server. And if that's false, which it always is, we're going to set our weather TrueSky sequence activator. So we're going to set our sky, which sets our time here, and it comes up here to set, and it pulls in our weather from our day cycle manager base, blends those into an array, and then we're going to set that into time here, and we're done. So this is a duplicate of something that I've already had, so I'm just going to delete all of this because I don't need it. It's the same thing as what's above, but the same principle applies. We go into our array, we set our blended weights to set our time. So every time weather is checked, does this change or does this not change, we set our time. That's what pretty much all that does. It's a little more complicated than it needs to be if we're just setting time, but doing this now will help us do weather, because I'll insert a video clip here of what the weather looks like on the center so you can get an idea of how crazy that is. Here's the clip. So if we can organize this now, we can make implementing weather easier in the future. So that's all that does. So let's save our main level blueprint, and this is going to compile our script here on this blueprint. If you have any errors and you're confused about your blueprint, please just send me a screenshot below. I'm more than happy to help. After this finishes, we have one thing left to do, and then we can go ahead and hit play. This is going to take a little while to compile because C++ and the Unreal Engine takes a while to compile, and then on top of that we're saving. So after it's compiled, we just need to make one last change, and we are going to go to our TrueSky sequence actor, and remember how I said we'd come back to this active sequences. We just need to create an element here, and then we're going to import a TrueSky sequence asset. I've chosen the center manual because I'm basing most of the weather off of the center. You can pick any of these, it doesn't really matter. I would suggest using a default or a manual, not using a heat wave or a rain one, but that's entirely personal. Once you've done that, it will sync up with our blueprint here. So doing the weather changes our TrueSky sequence, and you'll notice that the sky gets added to our scene once that is selected. So if we hit play and possess our character, we can see that the sky is now there. We are freezing to death, so I'll give myself infinite stats so I don't die. So we've implemented the sky. Our weather is not done, but my goal for today was to implement the sky. And we can see that we've done that. We no longer have edges to our water sphere. We can see a little bit on the side over here. We can see a little bit of that water sphere, but while we're in game, we won't actually be able to see that. And we have clouds, temperature, and sunlight. And if I waited long enough, it would eventually go to nighttime, should we implement that in the future. At some point in the future, we'll come back to this and finish the weather, but that's even more complicated, as we saw with the center blueprint. So for right now, I got what I wanted, which was having lighting and a more realistic sky. And that's it for this week. Thank you so much for watching. If you have any questions, again, I'm more than happy to help. Just drop me a comment below. The more information you give me about your issue, the more I can help you. Like, comment, subscribe, all that jazz. It really does help us out. And hopefully we'll see you next week.